And here we go. We've just opened up a new sandbox file, and it's empty. There's nothing inside of it yet. So one of the things that we saw in that problem, though, is that we need a flight class. So let's just do that right now. And I'm going to go new file, flight.java. And you have to give it the .java extension for it to work. And we're going to get rid of the main. We don't need main in there. Our main is going to be inside our my program here. Okay, so there's our public static void main. And inside of here, there is nothing yet, but we could start filling in some details. In fact, there's no reason not to do that now. Let's see, public int get num passengers. Okay. If you see me make a spelling mistake, let me know. And I'm just going to frame this thing up for now. And there's no arguments, so we can go on to the next one. Public double get price. Okay. Again, open and close. Now, the problem is we're going to get an error right off the bat. So I often just do this, return an int. I'll just return 0. This is a double, so I'll return 0.0. Oops, and I do need to remember this later that I've done this. But again, I'm just making sure that the thing executes. In fact, I often do something like this. Okay, again, I'm just checking, verifying that the thing does execute properly. Oh, and we got an error already. What did I do here? Yes, of course, I used a little bit of Python syntax. There we go. Okay, so we're off to a flying start here, pun intended, and on to the next one. I think there was one more. Let's just see. Oops. Get capacity, yes. Okay, get price and get capacity. And it's an integer again, so we're just, for now, we're just going to return 0. Again, just if I don't put that line in there and that nothing returns, as you probably know, we're going to get an error. Yeah, it says missing return statement. So we just need to return something, again, just to get this thing to execute for now. And it's an int, so 0 should be fine. And we should be error-free, even though this program's not doing what we want it to do quite yet. Okay, we could set this thing up now if we wanted to. Public class flight. Well, no, let's just wait. We won't bother with the constructor quite yet. Let's keep going. Yeah, there may be instance variables, constructors and methods that are not shown. Yeah, and we need to try and fill those in. And all we have to go by is the information inside of this program. So that might take a bit to get that set up. All right, so let's do airport class. So we're gonna new file, airport.java. And once again, let's get rid of main because our main is in our main program here. Okay, my program. Okay, so what methods do we need inside of our airport class? Let's see, private array list. So we better get that in there. That's a very important instance variable. So private array list, and I've already forgotten what it was. Array list flight objects. Okay, that I should have been able to figure that out. So this is going to be an array list of objects from the flight class. Okay, and it does have a name, and the name is all flights. Okay, what else do we have in here? Public double get total revenue. Okay, let's look through that. Revenue, and I didn't check to see if there's any arguments here. No arguments, okay. And again, I'm going to return 0.0, okay. We got to remember this, it's going to be a problem if I forget to solve that problem where it's not returning what we want. I'm just, again, trying to get through this without errors. And I want to see all of the different methods that are required inside of this each class. Public int update flights, okay. Int update flights, and again, obviously we're going to return 0 just to see if it compiles. And we got a problem. Private array. Oh yes, okay. So anyone know why this isn't working? Take a sip of water while you're looking at this. What's the problem here, you guys? When we use array lists, we got to import. Import java .util.array list. Okay, let's see if I did that right and if the error goes away. Okay, perfect. Hopefully a few of you knew that. Okay, what's next here? We're getting through this already. When the airport method get total, write the airport method get total revenue. The method returns a total revenue for all flights. So we need to set a few things up first of all. And this, I guess we should make an object or two just so that we're, just so that we can actually, again, ensure that our classes are working properly. So we're going to start off with the flight. No, we're going to start off with the main program, and let's make an array list. How do we know to do that? Well, we've got a bunch of flights. We've got to organize them somehow. So let's make an array list of flight objects. Okay, so these are, each of these constitutes an individual flight object, and we're going to put them into an array list called all flights. So it does tell us that. All right, so let's go to the main program here, and we can get rid of this line now. We know that it compiles, and I'm going to go array list flight. We give it a name. It said I'm going to call it all the flights, and the reason I'm doing that, I could call it all flights, but I think that's in our airport class. Yeah, and the scope rules would tell us that this variable is different than this variable, but I'm just worried it might be confusing. So let's just use a different variable name for now. Okay, and that's going to be a new array list, and it's an array list of flight objects. Okay, so that should look fine. And now what we need to do is we need to add some data. And I got to remember 25, 50, 30. Okay, 25, 50, 30. Because when you create these objects, oh, by the way, let's see what happens. Each time I add a line, I like to run this thing just to make sure things are working. Okay, we got a problem here. Let's see, array list flights. Yeah, it doesn't like that. And once again, we've got to add that same line. Let's just go and grab it. That'll be the quickest. And we're going to copy this and put that in our first line. So we need to import the libraries. And if we don't have the array list library, it's not going to run. Okay, and it's not doing anything, of course. Maybe that print line was good, just so we know it's executed. And maybe I'll add that back in here again. Okay, just something silly like that, so I know that that's the last thing that we should see inside of the program. Okay, good. Let's add an object or two to this so that it looks like that did work okay. So we're going to go all the flights dot add, and what are we going to add to this? We're going to add a new flight, and it's going to be what were the numbers? 25. I remember that one. $25, $50, and 30 is capacity. So 25, 50, and I think we should put .0 because it's a double, and 30. Now we might get a problem here. Let's see what happens, because we haven't built a constructor for this yet. So yeah, it doesn't like that. So we got to go to flight. We got to get this constructor figured out here, because without the constructor, we're not going to get anywhere. And we actually have lots of clues on how to build that constructor, because we know that there are 3 arguments, which means we're going to have 3 instance variables. Okay, and those variables are, let's figure that out. Number of passengers, price of the seat, and capacity. Okay, so back we go to flight. And we're going to start adding some instance variables in here. So the first one is an int, and it's number, I'll just call it number of passengers. Okay, there was a double. Let's get the order right here. There's a double, which is the price of a seat. And I'll just call it seat price. Oh. And we've got an integer which represents the capacity. I'll just call it cap. I don't know. Oh, we call it capacity. There we go. Okay, so now from that, okay, we've got our instance variables. And these should probably all be private, right? Which is what we normally do. Okay, from those, what we then can do, hopefully, is build our constructor. So what we know, it's going to be public flight, and now we simply add in the attributes, okay, the arguments here. And so we've got an int that represents passengers, or pass, I guess we'll say. We've got a double for price. Okay, that's a cost per seat, and we've got an integer for capacity. I'll just put capacity like that. And now we assign the instance variables. Number pass is equal to pass. Seat price is equal to price. And capacity is equal to cap. All right, let's see if this thing runs now. We'll go back here and hopefully, having added that object, hopefully it works. Oh, did it run? Oh, I didn't click run yet. Okay, perfect. We can build objects. So now all we do is just copy and paste this. We've got, oops, why did I unselect that? Control C for copy, paste, paste, paste. We've got 4 flights, and we just need to put the details for each in here. So we've got 10, 160. I think it was $100.50. Okay, we'll check in a second, and I think it was 60. Let's just make sure. 10, 100.5, yep, and 60, good. 50, 240, 50, 240. So that site is that flight is oversold, right? They sold 50 seats, but there's only got a capacity of 40. Just something to take mental note of. 20, 100, and 120. 20, 100, and 120. Okay. Just maybe check those numbers to make sure I got them all right. Otherwise, we're not gonna get the numbers that we need. Okay, I think we're good to go. I think we're getting there. Now, the next thing we need to do is we've created and instantiated our objects for the flight class, but we haven't used the airport class yet. And so we need to also instantiate an airport object. So I'm going to do that next. And the airport object is going to be it's inside of that is going to be contained an array list with all the flight objects in it. So this part could potentially be a little bit tricky, but anyway, it's going to look something like this. Airport, I'm going to call it YVR, I don't know, equals new airport, and it's going to contain all the flights. And let's see if that works. Might not. Right, oh, we got an error. Okay, constructor doesn't like the constructor, and so we need to go into the airport class and solve this problem. So we can't instantiate an object if we don't have a constructor that permits an array list as an argument. So we need to get that to work. Okay. And we already know that because they gave us that piece of information that one of the instance variables happens to be an array list, and so we got to make sure that we create that. So we're going to go. Let's see, public airport. Again, we're doing the constructor right now, and we already know that the airport constructor must have an array list, and that array list is going to be of flight objects. And we'll call it, here it's going to be called all flights. I think that is what they actually gave us to call it. And we've already got our variable, so it's just all flights. Oh, sorry, I'm going to call this, actually, we can put whatever we want in here. I'm just going to call that flights. All flights equals flights. There we go. Okay. Let's save that and let's try running it. By the way, you might have a question. If we've already created a variable called all flights, okay, up here, and we've sent an argument called flights into here, why do we have to bother assigning all flights to flights? Well, there's a good, that'd be a great question, and that may be a source of confusion for you. And actually, we can see the same thing in flight. Why don't we just use one set of variables? Why do we have two different variables representing the same thing? Well, I'll try to explain why. It's because this instance variable, there's only one of these instance variables, okay? However, in object-oriented programming in Java, it does something special with those instance variables where it assigns a new variable to each object. And the only way to do that is to literally assign it during that constructor phase. And so we're actually giving separate values to each of these variables to each object that's created. I don't know if I explained that very well, but that wouldn't work. If we didn't reassign this, each object would have the same values. And so that's why we use instance variables and literally reassign their values. Even though it's the same variable, we reassign them to each object. And part of the Java framework is to maintain which values are associated with which object. We don't have to concern ourselves with that. That's done inside the code. And that's the magic of object-oriented programming, or one of the pieces of that magic. I don't know if I tried to run this or not, but let's see if our constructor is working. Oh, that means it worked. Yahoo! Okay, so we're actually getting there. It doesn't look like much, but we're actually most of the way through this. Now all we need to do is solve this problem. And by the way, we better fix these right now because this is going to be a problem. This is not supposed to return 0. What is it supposed to return? Numpass. Okay. This is not 0. Get price. It should return seat price. Okay. And finally down here, this should return capacity. Okay, so we should be done with our flight class, hopefully. Our airport class, we've got problems here, but this is part A, I believe. I think it's A. Let's just make sure. Okay, for example, cap has been declared as an airport object. Sorry, I got to quickly refresh my memory. Complete. Get total revenue. Yes, we need to do that. Returns the revenue generated by all flights at the airport. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, we're not going to return that. We're going to return a variable, which we need to assign inside of here. Okay, so some variable needs to represent all of the money that we're going to return. And I use loot. Okay, so double loot. Now it should be money or revenue or something, but I don't know. I just like that one better. Double loot. And we should assign it equals 0. Okay, so double loot equals 0. And now what we need to do is iterate through all of the flights. Okay, so we can use an enhanced for loop for flight A, all flights. And we don't have to necessarily, let's do this the easy way. I'm going to set up variables for capacity is equal to a.get capacity. So again, A is the first flight object in that array list, okay? And so then what it's going to do is go inside of here and run the get capacity method, okay? And it's going to return some value and assign it to get capacity, or sorry, to cap. Okay, I'm just trying to simplify things a little bit here. Int passengers is going to be equal to a.get num passengers. Hopefully I spelled it right. And that should be the only two variables we need. We need the capacity and we need the number of passengers. Is that right? Oh, wait a second. Wait a second, there's a problem here. Oh, no, that's okay. Okay, so what happens if they've oversold? If they've oversold, then what we're going to have to do is assign the number of seats based on the capacity, not the number of seats sold, because they've sold more seats than they can actually have as passengers. Those extra passengers are not going to count as revenue because you're going to have to refund the money. That's it. So if, we'll do an if statement, if passengers, okay, is greater, is that the right variable? if passengers, yes, get passengers is greater than capacity, right? Then we're going to go loot plus equals capacity times a dot get price. Okay, that should work. Else loot plus equals passengers, oops, times a dot get price. Now, I could have done a dot capacity for cap here and here, but it just, to me, is just, I don't know, it's just a little bit easier to use those variables. There's no requirement. Incidentally, there's only one line in these statements, so we can shorten this. Java does allow us to remove those brackets if there's only a single line of execution associated with an if or else statement. It just cleans it up a little bit. And we don't want to return 0, we want to return the loot. Okay, so let's just check this to see if this is working. Save. Get total revenue. Okay, so how are we going to actually, well, that might actually do it. That might be all we need. That might solve the first part here. I think we've done this actually. So let's go system.out.println yvr.get total revenue. Let's see if it's working. Drum roll, please. Should be 12,000 or something if I remember the numbers right. Ah, yes, and we'll get rid of that working line. We don't need that anymore because we've got our output and we're half done. We're more than half done. Let's just verify that number. I think it was 12,000. Yep, 12,255, which is what we have here. Okay, on to B. Everybody with me so far? Just stop the share for a sec. How are you guys doing? Yeah, is it all making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's making sense.
Okay, is this helpful or?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me keep going here. Back to where we were. If I can find, where was that now? Is that the one? We'll know in a second. Oh yes, perfect. Okay, so part B, passengers and flights were removed. Oh yeah, so what we want to do is remove any flights where the passenger capacity is less than 20%, which makes sense from a financial perspective. Okay, so how in the world are we going to do that? So we need to go back to where our methods are, which is inside of airport.
Mr. Keglund.
Yes.
It's sharing.
Oh,
You're different. I think.
thank you, thank you. Okay, let's see if I can find that right. Is it this one? Thanks. Kate, is that right now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so so inside of here, this is going to be B, where we update flights. And once again, we've got to check the capacity first to make sure that they're at least at 20%. And if they are, we're not going to do anything. If they're not, I think it wants us to return the number of passengers that for whom we've canceled flights. The flight number of passengers less than 20% of the passengers should be returned. Total number of passengers whose flight was removed. Total number of passengers whose flight was removed. So we're going to need to count that up. We know that's going to be a variable inside of here. And so what I'm going to do two things right off the bat. First of all, I'm going to instantiate a new variable, or initialize a variable, I should say. And that variable is going to be, it's just passengers, I guess. Passengers equals 0. So we haven't inconvenienced any yet. And I'm going to set the return statement. So don't forget to do that, because when I've got a 0 in there, just to make sure this thing doesn't work, if I forget and leave that 0, that's going to be a problem. Okay, so it should at least execute still, hopefully. Should see our 12,000 up there. Okay, yeah, we haven't done anything inside of here yet. So we're going to need to do another for loop, and we're going to need to iterate through all of the flights once again. I don't know if we need to do an enhanced, I don't know if we can do an enhanced for loop. No, we can't, because we're going to be removing objects. And if we're removing objects from the array list, we must use the standard for loop. So int I equals 0, I is less than all flights dot size, I plus plus. Okay. And I'll scroll down a bit. Let's see, what do we do here? I'm going to set up variables again, kind of like what I did here, just to, again, to simplify the code a little bit. So int seats equals all flights dot get. Oh boy, this is going to be a mouthful. I. So we want to get that flight, which is what we're doing here. But then from that flight, we want to call another method. And we can do that so conveniently in Java by simply using the dot notation. So it's dot get num passengers, I think was the method. And again, I usually, I don't know if you can see this, but I always write down, if you can see my camera, I'll hold this up to it. I write down right at the beginning the methods that are associated with each of the classes. And so I just keep that little crib sheet there so I don't have to keep going back to refer to flight and go, oh, what was the name of that thing again? I've got it written down. I find that saves me time, but do it whichever way you like. Okay, so get number passengers, and don't forget the semicolon on the end. I'm going to do the same for passengers. So that's okay. Seats, passengers. So sorry, this should be. I think this should probably be cap here, shouldn't it? Seats. Yeah, this is our capacity. Equals all flights dot get I once again. So we're doing the same thing. So that would just go and grab one flight at a time. If you notice in the previous for loop, the enhanced for loop, it does it so much more elegantly because A simply takes on each flight object. So it allows us to a little more succinctly do what amounts to the same thing so far. That A is being replaced with all flights dot get I. So it's we've got to use the get method to access that object. And this is going to be get capacity. Oops. If you notice me make a mistake, let me know. And now we got a little if loop here, and it's going to be, let's see. I always start by explaining it in English. If we divide the two, seats divided by the capacity, right? If we divide seats by capacity and it's less than 0.2. Okay, so let's try that. If seats divided by capacity is less than 0.2, okay, we're going to want to do something. I can see a problem here already. And the problem is these are both integer values. So let's just, before I forget, I'm going to put a double in here so that we convert that to a double because we're going to need a decimal number out of that. Okay, hopefully that works. If double seats divided by capacity is is less than 0.2, what do we want to do? First thing we want to do is passengers plus equal. So that's our variable up here that we're going to be returning. We want to take all those passengers before we delete the object, plus equals seats, okay? Because we've already assigned seats to that value. You can see the advantage to creating these variables, which is not necessary, but we'd have to take all of this and put it in place of seats, and each time we use seats. So it's just, this is definitely easier code to read, I think. And now we got to remove one, so it's all flights dot remove I. Okay, we just use the remove method. And now because we've removed one, at that point, do we have to also decrement? Let's try. I think we do have to decrement, right? All right, so let's return passengers. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Let's see if this compiles. See if we got any errors in there. Oh, okay, no errors. Wow, that never happens. Okay, so now we're going to go system.out.println yvr once again dot what was it again? Get update or something? Whoops, wrong. Update flights. Update flights. Okay. Update flights. And once again, drum roll, please. I would be astounded if this worked the first time. Oh, and it worked. Okay, that never happens when I'm demonstrating stuff. Wow. Okay. Capacity. So let's go back and just do a quick check on this. We have the flights that are obviously under 10 out of 60. So we're going to lose 10 passengers there, and we're going to lose 20 passengers on that 120 flight, which is 30 total. And we have solved the problem. The only thing that I'd like to go back and mention is right here. And I want to just talk a bit about this because we've actually combined 2 steps into one, and you may be confused with this. I'm not sure. But what we could do is go like this. Flight, let's just give it a name. Calgary, okay. Calgary equals new flight. Wait now. It's a flight object. What do we have to do? And we have to put the numbers in here. 25, 50, 30. Okay. And now what we could do is add Calgary here, and that should work. Okay. I'm not sure. Did I break something here? We'll know in a second. Yeah, it still works. So you could see that we could break each of these down into 2 steps. And in fact, when you're first working on these sorts of problems, I always did this. I always created the flight objects, and then I added those flight objects into my array list. It's just that you can do it in 1 step. And the really interesting thing about this, it actually makes for an interesting problem. I've given this a name, which I'm assuming would be associated with the destination for this flight. There is no destination included in here, which is an obvious flaw to this. But we don't need to actually name each object. And that's, if anyone's been wondering about that, this is kind of a little curiosity. Objects don't require names. And so once again, Java in the magic of what's happening behind the scenes, assigns its own way of understanding which item that is inside of our array list, and that's quite neat actually. So again, we don't need to do this, but if it helps the understanding, feel free to first of all instantiate objects for the flight class, and then add them into this array list afterwards. Okay.